In this math lesson, we want to learn how to form quadratic equation from a given root. So we want to say, what do you mean by a root or roots? The root is simply the solution to the quadratic equation. For instance, if you have x squared minus 7x plus 10, for instance, you know that there are two possible values for x. X is equals to 5 or x is equals to 2. So this 5 and 2 is what we call the roots of this quadratic equation. Remember, there is equals to 0 here. So this 5 and 2 is what we refer as the root of this quadratic equation. The solution to a quadratic equation is what we refer as the root or the roots of the quadratic equation. So it is possible to get the quadratic equation when you are given the roots. For instance, supposing I'm given the roots to be x equals to 5, x equals to 2. So I can form this quadratic equation from this solution. So I know that x is equals to 5. Then on the other side, I know that x is equals to 2. Then from here, I can create another expression or another equation. So x equals to 5 can be written as x minus 5 equals to 0. So what it means that if you decide to bring 5 to the left hand side, it becomes minus 5. Then on the right hand side, nothing remains there. That's what we refer as 0. Then here the same thing happens. You can write here as x minus 2 equals to 0. Okay. So what does it mean? It means that here is equals to 0, here is equals to 0. Do you remember our principle that if a times b is equals to 0, it means that a is equals to 0 or b is equals to 0, or a and b is equals to 0. So this corresponds to a situation where this is our a is equals to 0, here our b is equals to 0. That means if you combine them, a times b will give us 0. So it means that x minus 5, which is our a, times our b, which is equals to x minus 2. So this will give us 0. So we are choosing this 0 to get a quadratic equation being equals to 0. So all you need to do is to expand. So here you have x times x gives you x squared. Here you have x times minus 2 gives you minus 2x. Here you have minus 5 times x gives you minus 5x. And finally, here you have minus 5 times minus 2, that gives you plus 10. So this is still equals to 0. So you combine the like terms, minus 2x minus 5x gives you minus 7x. Now plus 10 equals to 0. So you go back to this quadratic equation. So whenever the roots of the quadratic equation are given, you can get back the originating quadratic equation. So that's what we mean. So we kick off with some of the examples on the screen now. So we are starting with the a part. So the roots of the equation here is giving us 4 and 6. So it means that our x is equals to 4. Another x is equals to 6. So these are the roots. So here you can write this as x minus 4 is equals to 0. Here you can write it as x minus 6 is equals to 0. So that when you multiply both of them, you get 0. So it means therefore that x minus 4 times x minus 6 will now give us 0. So we open up the bracket. So you have x times x gives you x squared. The same x times minus 6 gives you minus 6x. Here you have minus 4 times x leaves you with minus 4x. And finally, you have minus 4 times minus 6 plus 24. So you have this to be equals to 0. Okay, so here you have x squared minus 6x minus 4x will give us minus 10x. Now plus 24 is equals to 0. So this is actually the quadratic equation we are looking for. So now, if you use any of the methods to solve this quadratic equation, you will get x to the 4 and x to the 6. That's what it means. And remember, we are told to leave it in this general form. And of course, what we have confirms with that. So we'll look at the second part of the question. So for B, we have our x to be minus 1.5 and x to be 3. Let's put this one in a fraction. So we can write it as minus 15 over 10. And this will give us minus 3 over 2. So we'll leave it as minus 3 over 2. So it will be easy to handle in that form. So now here, instead of writing minus 1.5, we'll write minus 3 over 2. So they are the same thing, only that handling it in a fraction will be more easy than handling it in a decimal form. So what it means therefore that if you bring here minus 3 over 2 to the left hand side becomes plus. So here will be x plus 3 over 2. And you still have 0. Then here, when 3 is coming over, it becomes negative. So here becomes x minus 3 equals 0. So that we can now combine them. So here you now have x plus 3 over 2 in brackets times x minus 3. So this will give us 0. So we open up. So here we have x times x to be x squared. Then you have the same x multiplying minus 3 to give us minus 3x. Then the next is to look at 3 over 2 times x. That will leave us with plus 3 over 2x. Then finally, we look at the same minus 3 over 2 times minus 3. That will leave us with minus 9 over 2. And this is equals to 0. So the next thing is to clear fraction. So to clear the fraction, we have the denominators, which is 2 and 2. So the LCM of 2 and 2 is 2. So you multiply both sides of the equation by 2. So here you have 2 times x squared. Then minus, here you have 2 times 3x. Then here you have plus 2 times 3 over 2x. Here you have minus 2 times 9 over 2. Then on the right hand side, I have 2 times 0. So what happens here? You have 2 times x squared will leave us with 2x squared. Then here you have minus 2 times 3x will leave us with minus 6x. Then here you see that these 2 can cancel out 2 here. So you're left with 3x there. So you have your 3x. So minus the other side, the same thing happens. You have 2 cancelling out 2 here. So you're left with minus 9. Then on the right hand side, 2 times 0 still leaves us with 0. So we collect like terms. So here, we still have our 2x squared. Then here you have minus 6x plus 3x. To understand it clearly, you can start with the positive value. So you can write this as plus 3x minus 6x. Minus 9 equals 0. So here now we still have our 2x squared. Then here you have plus 3x minus 6x. That is going to be negative because you are subtracting a big number from a small number. So that will give us minus 3x. Then here gives us minus 9 equals to 0. And this is actually the desired quadratic equation. And of course, when you solve this quadratic equation, it will give you two values of x as minus 1.5 and 3. So that's what we have. So we finally look at the C part of the same question. So for C, we have x to be 2 over 3. Another x to be minus 5 over 6. So we can write this as this x minus 2 over 3. And here we can write it as x. So this one will be plus because it's coming over the other side. Over 6. So this is equals to 0. This is equals to 0. So when you combine them, so you have x minus 2 over 3 times x plus 5 over 6. So when you multiply, this still gives you 0. So now here we have x times x gives you x squared. Here you have x times 5 over 6 will leave you with plus 5 over 6x. And here you have minus 3 times x. That will leave you with minus 2 over 3x. And finally, you have minus 2 over 3 times 5 over 6. That will leave you with minus 2 over 3 times 5 over 6. So here is 0. So we simplify. So here you have x squared plus 5 over 6x minus 2 over 3x. Then here minus, here I have 2 over 3 times 5 over 6. Here 2 times 5 is 10. Then here 3 times 6 is 18. So equals to 0. So we look out for the LCM. So you have the denominator to be 6, 3, 18. So if you look out for the LCM of 6, 3, and 18, you will agree with me that it will give you 18. So you multiply through by the LCM in order to remove the fraction. If you do that now, you have 18 times x squared plus 18 times 5 over 6x minus 18 times 2 over 3x minus 18 times 10 over 18 is equals to 18 times 0. That will give us now, here we have 18 times x squared will leave us with 18x squared. Then here we'll see that 6 will divide itself 1, then divides 18, that will give us 3. So now in the numerator we're having 3 times 5. So that gives us 15x. So we have this 3 times this 5x. So when it multiplies, you have 3 times 5, which is 15 times x. That gives us 15x. So here you have minus. So here now 3 divides minus 18 will give us minus 6. And that minus 6 times 2 gives us minus 12. Then times the x there. So you have minus 12x. Then here you have your minus. Then here, this 18, we cancel out this 18. So you're left with minus 10. So you have minus 10 there. Then 18 times 0 on the right hand side. That is here. You have 18 times 0. That will leave you with 0. So we finish up. Here you have 18x squared. Here you have 15x minus 12x will leave you with 3x. Then minus 10 is equals to 0. So this is actually the required quadratic equation. And of course, if you solve this, we're able to get this as a solution of that quadratic equation.